October 1931. The deadly grip of the Arctic pack ice has taken hold. Welcome to this Forgotten Mysteries Chronicles explainer, where we're going to dig into the factual and honestly, slightly eerie historical account of the SS Baychimo. This is the story of a ship that simply refused to die.
So picture the scene. The crew of the Baychimo is completely trapped in the pack ice right at the end of a trading run. It's a desperate situation. The Hudson's Bay Company had actually already sent aircraft to retrieve 22 members of the crew earlier in October, but 15 men stayed behind. They built a wooden shelter some distance away, fully intending to just hunker down and wait out the brutal winter. But then, on November 24th, a massive, blinding blizzard strikes their camp. When the storm finally breaks and these guys emerge from their shelter, they look out over the ice and realize their massive steel cargo ship has completely vanished.
Looking out at that totally empty expanse of ice, the skipper of the Baychimo made the only logical assumption anyone really could make in that kind of environment. He concluded that the ship must have been crushed by the tremendous pressure of the shifting ice and then sank during the storm. And honestly, you can't really blame him, right? It's the Arctic. Ships are swallowed by the ice all the time. The crew officially wrote her off as a total loss. They abandoned all hope of ever seeing the Baychimo again.
But here is where it gets crazy. Just days after the skipper declared her sunk, an Inuit seal hunter arrived at their camp with impossible news. He had found the Baychimo. She hadn't sunk at all. In fact, she was perfectly intact and currently drifting 45 miles away from the crew's position. The storm hadn't crushed her, it had simply torn her free from the ice and sent her sailing away, completely on her own.
Section 1. Origins of the Baychimo, from WWI Reparations to the Hudson's Bay Company. Before we follow this phantom ship on her solitary journey, let's just quickly lay out the facts of what she was before she became derelict.
She was launched in 1914 out of the Lindholmen's shipyard in Gothenburg, Sweden, as a 1,322-ton cargo steamer. At 230 feet long, with a solid steel hull and a triple expansion steam engine, she was built to endure. She could hit a top speed of 10 knots. Now you have to remember, this wasn't some fragile wooden schooner. This was a heavy, industrial-age machine designed from the ground up to take an absolute beating.
She was originally built for a company in Hamburg, Germany, and worked their trade routes before World War I. After the war, she was actually transferred to the UK as part of Germany's war reparations for shipping losses. Then, by 1921, she was acquired by the famous Hudson's Bay Company. Based out of Scotland, she became this incredibly reliable workhorse. She knocked out 9 completely successful voyages along the really treacherous northern coast of Canada, routinely navigating the Victoria Island coast to trade provisions for pelts at Inuit settlements. Basically, she was a known, highly dependable presence in the Arctic.
Section 2. The Ghost Ship Era, a vessel sailing itself. Let's jump back to that freezing winter of 1931. After the seal hunters spotted her 45 miles away, those 15 remaining crewmen actually managed to track the ship down. But once they got to her and saw the condition of the ice, they decided the ship was ultimately doomed to be crushed before winter's end. So they retrieved their most valuable furs from the hold, arranged for air transport, and officially abandoned the Baychimo for good. And the math of what happens next is just inherently eerie. Think about this. She saw 17 years of service with a living, breathing crew at the helm. But against all odds, she did not sink that winter. She survived out there entirely unmanned for another 38 years. She literally spent more than twice as much time sailing as a ghost ship than she ever did as a functioning company vessel.
Section 3. Boardings and Failed Salvages, Tracking the Phantom. Now you're probably wondering, if she was out there drifting for 38 years, did anyone ever actually see her?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's walk through some of the highly documented factual sightings of this derelict ship as she drifted aimlessly through the Chukchi and Beaufort Seas.
Throughout the 1930s, the Baychimo essentially became an Arctic legend. Just months after she vanished, she was spotted 300 miles to the east. By January 1932, a guy named Leslie Melvin, who was traveling by dog sled to Nome, Alaska, saw her just floating peacefully near the shore. Explorers on a schooner found her again in July 1934. The ship was basically doing laps around the Arctic, popping up out of the fog and ice just long enough to totally shock whoever happened to cross her path.
And not all of these encounters were just brief sightings from a distance. In March 1933, a group of Inupiat hunters came across the frozen vessel and decided to board her. Now imagine this. While they were exploring the empty, dead silent corridors of this ghost ship, a massive freak storm suddenly blew in. The conditions outside became so severe they literally couldn't risk leaving.
So this group of hunters was trapped aboard the unheated, powerless Baychimo for 10 harrowing days, just waiting out the storm inside a frozen metal tomb before they could finally escape.
Over the years, a surprisingly diverse group of people managed to step foot on her decks. Prospectors found her. In August 1933, she drifted just 12 miles off Wainwright, Alaska, allowing locals and the crew of a ship called the MS Trader to board her. Even a famous passenger, the Scottish author and botanist Isabel Wiley Hutcheson, boarded the ghost ship. Hutcheson actually managed to salvage a whaleboat, some furniture, and a few other items from the Baychimo before leaving her to drift away all over again.
Fast forward to November 1939. An experienced mariner named Captain Hugh Polson decides it's time to end the mystery once and for all. He boards the Baychimo with the serious intention of salvaging her. He had the right equipment, he had the know-how, but the Arctic seemingly had other plans. Because just as Polson was preparing the salvage, creeping ice floes began to rapidly close in around his own ship. The ice basically intervened, threatening to trap him exactly like it had trapped the Baychimo's original crew 8 years earlier. Polson was forced to abandon the ghost ship and literally flee for his life.
Section 4. The Final Disappearance. The Arctic reclaims its prize. As the decades wore on into the mid-20th century, sightings of the Baychimo understandably grew incredibly rare. The world was changing, but the phantom ship stubbornly refused to vanish completely from the records.
So after Paulson's failed salvage in '39, there was this massive gap until March 1962, when a group of Inuit sighted her drifting along the Beaufort Sea coast. Then, in 1969, exactly 38 years after she was abandoned by our crew, the Baychimo was spotted one last time. She was stuck fast in an ice pack in the Chukchi Sea, right between Point Barrow and Icy Cape. And that was it. That was the absolute last recorded sighting of the vessel. In 2006, the Alaskan government even initiated a project to try and solve the mystery and locate her remains, whether she was still afloat or on the ocean floor. But to this day, they have found absolutely nothing.
So why do experts believe she finally disappeared after 1969? Well, it really comes down to basic physics and metallurgy, specifically a process called temperature cycling. You see, for 38 consecutive years, the Baychimo's steel hull was subjected to the most extreme freezing and thawing conditions on Earth. Every single year, the metal would contract in the brutal winter and expand in the brief summer. Decades of that kind of repeated stress almost certainly led to severe structural fatigue, eventually causing that tough steel hull to fail and finally sink beneath the ice.
Which leaves us with a pretty haunting question. Was the Baychimo finally crushed and sent to the ocean floor by temperature cycling, or does she still sit perfectly preserved in some unseen, undiscovered tomb of Arctic ice, completely hidden from our modern satellites and search efforts? It is a testament to the sheer, untamable power of the Arctic that a massive steel ship could just vanish, reappearing and disappearing at will for nearly 4 decades. A ship can disappear. So can a plane, a colony, even a person hiding in plain sight of history. Next time, the most famous vanishing act in aviation history and why we still don't know what really happened.